We all know, I'm sure, how common sleep problems are for folks with autism,
Right.
with estimates suggesting, are you ready for this? 40 to 80% are affected.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's huge. It's almost like flipping a coin. Will they have sleep problems or won't they?
Yeah.
But what if some of these sleep disturbances that we're seeing are more than just your typical insomnia or trouble falling asleep or whatever it is?
Yeah.
What if it's something else? And
Right.
that's what we're diving into today, because we're
Something
going to
like
be looking at a fascinating and honestly often overlooked area, and that is the possible link between autism and restless leg syndrome.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about the connection there and what implications it has for, diagnosis and treatment and, all of it. So, yeah.
So for our listeners out there who maybe aren't familiar,
Sure.
can you give us a little bit of a crash course on what restless leg syndrome is? Because, people hear restless legs and they think, oh, I fidget sometimes too. That's restless legs. But it's not just about fidgeting, is it?
No, not at all. And it's definitely, it can be a really difficult condition to live with.
Okay.
Restless leg syndrome, or RLS,
Yeah.
is a neurological condition characterized by this irresistible urge to move your legs. And it often comes with these really uncomfortable sensations.
Ah.
So imagine like a creeping, crawling, or tingling feeling, but deep inside your legs,
Mm.
especially when you're trying to relax or sleep.
Oh, I can see how that would be a
It
problem.
makes it really tough.
Like, how are you supposed to sleep when you're feeling like that?
Right.
You can't, right? And that's where the connection to autism is so interesting, because studies show that between 18 and 25% of autistic children, so again, we're talking about kids here,
Right.
might have RLS compared to just 5 to 10% of what we call neurotypical children. So those are children without autism.
Exactly.
So that's a pretty big difference, right?
That's significant, yeah.
So what's going on there? Is there something about autism, like the diagnosis of autism itself, that might make someone more susceptible to developing restless leg syndrome?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And I know you have some answers for us, so what is going on?
Well, one of the leading theories, and this is something that's been studied quite a bit, is this neurotransmitter called dopamine.
Okay.
And both autism and RLS have been linked to differences in how the brain processes dopamine.
Huh. So dopamine, that's our feel-good chemical, right?
Yeah, it's involved in, that feeling of reward and pleasure,
Yeah.
but it also plays a big role in movement and attention.
So maybe like a malfunctioning reward system, if you will.
You could think of it that way. And this dysregulation in the dopamine system, it could contribute to both conditions independently. But here's what's really interesting,
Okay.
especially for you, because this is what you're researching. Understanding this shared mechanism, this dopamine connection, it could open doors for new treatment approaches that address both conditions at the same time.
That would be amazing.
So dopamine, it's not all about pleasure and reward. It's also really important for regulating movement. And so when that system gets disrupted, it can actually lead to those uncomfortable sensations,
Oh, I see.
that urge to move, that kind of thing.
Like the actual symptoms of restless legs.
Exactly.
Okay.
Kind of how they all tie together.
That makes a lot of sense, but I'm thinking about folks with autism.
Yeah.
And how does this dopamine connection play into their experience specifically?
That is where it gets even more interesting because, a lot of individuals with autism experience sensory sensitivities,
Mm-hmm.
things like light, sound, touch,
Right. It can be really intense for them.
much more intense.
Yeah.
And so now imagine you've got those sensory sensitivities, and then you layer on top of that the already uncomfortable sensations of restless legs.
Oh, man.
It's a lot.
It's got to be overwhelming.
It can be incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like someone's playing a song you don't like, and then they just keep turning the volume up.
Right.
This is just too much all the time.
Exactly.
So are researchers thinking that those sensory sensitivities could actually make the restless leg symptoms even worse for someone with autism?
Yeah, that's the theory. And it makes sense, right?
It does.
Because if you're already sensitive to sensory input, and then you add these weird sensations on top of it,
Right. It's just, ugh,
it's just too much.
I can't even imagine.
And it can be really hard to tease those apart too, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about a child who is maybe nonverbal,
Yeah, they can't describe what they're feeling.
exactly, how are they going to tell you what's going on?
They can't.
So they might just seem restless, irritable, they can't settle down, especially at bedtime.
Right. And for parents and caregivers who are already, dealing with supporting a child with autism,
Absolutely.
those sleepless nights, it's like, that's the last thing they need.
It's exhausting.
It really is.
It can really take a toll.
So I think this really highlights how important that open communication with your child's doctor
It's
is.
essential.
Really is.
Because parents and caregivers are often the first ones to notice those subtle changes.
Absolutely.
And they might not even think anything of it.
Right.
But just mentioning it to your doctor,
Can make a world of difference.
it can be the key to getting the right help.
So let's say a parent is listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, that's my kid.
Yeah.
Like, I think they might be dealing with this. What do they do? What are the next steps? So what can parents or caregivers do?
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
Because the good news is there are things you can do
Okay.
that can make a real difference.
Okay. Great.
One of the simplest but most effective is establishing a consistent sleep schedule.
Oh, okay. So that's like going to bed, waking up around the same time every day.
Exactly.
Even on the weekends. That's the hard part.
I know, it's tough.
Yeah.
But it really helps to regulate that natural sleep-wake cycle.
Makes sense. You're kind of like training your body.
Exactly. You're creating that predictability. And then, in addition to the sleep routine, regular physical activity during the day can be really helpful.
Oh, okay. So like tire them out.
Yeah, get that energy out.
But not like right before bed, I'm guessing.
No, not right before bed.
Okay.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, you don't want to get them all riled up.
Exactly. You got to find that balance.
Okay, so we've got the sleep schedule, we've got exercise. What else?
Warm baths before bed can be really soothing.
Oh, yeah. I like those.
A little massage, a weighted blanket, anything to kind of provide that sense of calm and security.
Okay, those are good. And I bet for sensory sensitivities, like we were talking about before,
Yeah,
those things probably help a lot too, right?
absolutely. And there are even more things you can do in the sleep environment.
Oh, okay, like what?
Well, minimizing visual distractions is key. So keeping the room dark, clutter-free.
Right, like a nice calm space.
Exactly. Blackout curtains can be a game changer.
Those are amazing. I have those in my bedroom. I love those
They
things.
make a big difference.
What about for sound?
Sound, too. A lot of people with autism are sensitive to sound.
Hmm.
So a white noise machine or even a fan can be really helpful.
Just that kind of consistent background noise.
Exactly. It drowns out all this little distracting sound.
And temperature too, right? Like some people are really sensitive to being too hot or too cold.
That's a big one. Keeping the room cool and comfortable.
I feel like we could do a whole deep dive just on temperature and sleep.
Oh, easily.
It's so important.
It is. But the key takeaway here
Yeah.
is that there's no one size fits all.
Right. Of course, everyone's different.
Every child is different. Every family is different.
So it's really about finding what works.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment.
I like that.
Try different things. See what helps your child.
It's all about that observation, right? Paying attention, like you said, talking to your doctor.
Communication is key.
It really is.
You're on the front lines. You know your child best.
That's a good point to end on, I think.
It is.
This has been such an interesting deep dive. I feel like we've learned so much about restless leg syndrome and, that possible connection to autism. And I think most importantly, what can be done to help.
That's what matters.
It really is, because knowledge is power, right?
Exactly.
So hopefully our listeners out there feel a little more empowered, a
Absolutely.
little more informed.
And maybe a little less alone.
That's a good point. It's true, because when you're going through these things, sometimes you feel like you're the only one.
It can feel very isolating.
It can, but it's not.
Not at all.
So if you're dealing with this, know that you're not alone and there are things that you can do. And hopefully this is giving you some ideas, some places to start.
And if you want to learn more, there are tons of resources available.
There are. We'll put some links in the show notes.
Perfect.
But for now, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll see you next time.